I received what seemed to be a thoughtful gift from my son-in-law, a bottle of expensive wine. The next day, he called me. With a voice full of barely disguised sarcasm, he asked, "Did you like the wine, my friend? I guarantee it will be your last." I paused, then replied with utmost calm, "Oh, that bottle. You know I don't drink alcohol, so I gave it to your father when I visited him this morning." The silence on the other end was broken by a scream of pure terror. "You gave the wine to my father!" At that moment, he learned a valuable lesson about wickedness. "My name is Elliot. I'm 72 years old, and over the course of my life, I have built a reputation for soundness and intuition. Decades in the business world taught me to read between the lines, to sense when something wasn't right. Even if the surface appeared immaculate, this sharp intuition has always been my compass. To it, I added a genuine kindness, an almost naive tendency to see the best in people, even when the evidence pointed to the contrary. And perhaps that was my greatest weakness, an inclination to shoulder blame that wasn't mine, to endlessly question if I had done something to deserve the coldness or hostility of others. For months, this weakness had been gnawed at by a growing doubt, a nagging feeling that my son-in-law, Daniel, deeply hated me, though I couldn't decipher why. Every attempt I made to get closer, every gesture to be the perfect father-in-law, seemed to irritate him even more. I lived under a cloud of uncertainty, always searching for the flaw in myself, the mistake that would justify his contempt. It was on a Thursday afternoon that the doubt morphed into something more palpable, more menacing. Daniel showed up at my condo door, not for our usual coffee, but with an elegant bottle of French wine in his hands. "Brought a little something for you," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, which remained cold, calculating, like two slits of ice. The packaging was of a luxury that surprised me, a golden label from a brand I didn't recognize, but which exuded an air of sophistication. The aroma wafting from the bottle, even before it was opened, was strong, almost medicinal, which caused me a slight unease. "French wine, I imagine," I commented, taking the bottle. Its weight in my hand felt unusual. "Yes, a special one," Daniel replied, his eyes still fixed on mine, as if assessing me, waiting for a reaction. My intuition, the one that warned me of invisible dangers in the business world, began to whisper something was wrong. Daniel never gave me gifts like this, gestures of consideration. His actions toward me were always calculated, cold, devoid of any genuine affection. This sudden gift was completely out of character, especially since he knew perfectly well that I had drastically reduced my alcohol consumption on my doctor's recommendation. My mind began to race, trying to fit together the pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know existed. Why now? Why such an expensive wine with such a peculiar aroma? I felt a chill down my spine. His motivation for this seemingly kind gesture was being questioned by my intuition. I thanked him, of course, with my best expression of gratitude, but Daniel's smile, though polite, held a gleam of anticipation that disturbed me. It was as if he knew something I didn't, something he expected to unfold. I held the bottle, its weight becoming a heavy burden in my hands, and the conversation continued for a few minutes about trivialities, my mind working furiously to decipher the enigma. I watched him as he spoke, trying to find some clue in his behavior, but his mask was perfect. Finally, he stood up to leave. "Well, I have an urgent meeting. I hope you enjoy the wine." "Elliot," there was a subtle emphasis on the word enjoy, almost a challenge. I closed the door behind him, the dry sound echoing in the silence of the condo. The bottle of wine seemed to pulse in my hands, and its strong aroma, which had intrigued me before, now filled me with a sense of repulsion. I didn't know why, but I knew something wasn't right, and that feeling made me tremble. I needed to unravel the mystery before it was too late. The bottle of wine rested on my coffee table, an elegant and paradoxically threatening object. Its golden label seemed to shine with a sinister promise. The intuition that had guided me for decades was screaming a warning. I could feel it in the air, a shiver down my spine, a sense that this gift was not a gesture of affection, but a carefully orchestrated trap. Why would Daniel, who had always been so distant, so calculating in his interactions with me, give me such an expensive wine? And why, knowing I had cut back on alcohol, would he insist that I enjoy it? The memory of his hollow smile, his cold eyes, stubbornly haunted me. My mind buzzed with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Was it a form of mockery, a test? My tendency to shoulder blame made me question if I had done something, however unconsciously, to provoke such behavior. But my intuition, stronger now, insisted that the fault was not mine. I spent the night ruminating, the bottle of wine at the center of my thoughts. I couldn't sleep well. My dreams were fragmented, full of shadows and smiles that didn't reach the eyes. The next morning, the timid Friday sun streamed through my window, but the atmosphere in my condo remained heavy. I picked up the bottle again, sniffing the neck. The strong, almost medicinal aroma was more noticeable in the daylight. It didn't smell like the rich, complex bouquet of a fine French wine. It smelled different, as if something had been added. My stomach clenched with a suspicion that was beginning to form, a suspicion so absurd I almost dismissed it. But my intuition wouldn't let me. It was then that I remembered Daniel's father, Mr. Rodriguez, a kind and affable man who had always treated me with genuine warmth. We visited each other occasionally, sharing stories and laughs. He often lamented having to reduce his own wine consumption due to age-related health issues. His eyes, when he spoke of wine, always sparkled with a palpable nostalgia. How he would enjoy this, I thought, looking at the bottle's label. Suddenly, the idea seemed perfect, a genuine act of kindness I could perform. It would be a gift for someone who would truly appreciate it, and at the same time, I wouldn't have to worry about drinking something that made me so uncomfortable. The decision was made quickly. I put on my coat and, with the bottle of wine carefully packed in a gift bag, drove to Mr. Rodriguez's house. He greeted me with his welcoming smile and an invitation for coffee. "I brought you a small token," I said, handing him the bag. "Daniel gave me this wine, but as you know, I haven't been drinking much lately on my doctor's advice. I didn't want to raise suspicion, so the white lie seemed the best option." Mr. Rodriguez's eyes lit up with joy. "Oh, Elliot, how kind of you. Daniel is a good boy, but he's never given me a wine as elegant as this." The way he said "good boy" sent a shiver through me. He truly believed in his son, without a shadow of a doubt. "It's French, look at that," he exclaimed, already opening the bottle with enthusiasm. The sound of the cork popping echoed in the small living room. "The aroma is peculiar," he commented, sniffing the neck. "Almost medicinal, like some wines that age in an interesting way." His observation confirmed my own perception. He poured a small amount into a crystal glass and tasted it, his eyes closing in appreciation. "It's different," he said, with a forced smile. "But good, very good." We stayed there for another hour, chatting about trivial matters. I watched him, trying to detect any sign, but he seemed perfectly fine, enjoying his wine. We said our goodbyes with the promise of another meeting soon, and I returned home with a strange feeling. The bottle of wine was no longer on my table, but the sense that something was wrong persisted. Less than 2 hours after I had left Mr. Rodriguez's house, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, my heart racing. But it wasn't Daniel, it was Mr. Rodriguez, and his voice was weak, trembling, laden with pain. "Elliot, I need help. I'm feeling terribly sick, with awful cramps and nausea. I think it was something I drank." The phone slipped from my hand. the sound of it falling muffled by the roar of a terrible suspicion forming in my mind, freezing my blood. Mr. Rodriguez's words echoed in my mind, each one a sharp blow, a hammer driving home the terrible truth I had been desperately trying to avoid. I need help. I'm feeling terribly sick. I think it was something I drank. The phone had fallen from my hand, the sound muffled by the dread that washed over me. The bottle of wine, the peculiar aroma, Daniel's cold eyes, it all clicked into place, a picture so horrendous it made me dizzy. I staggered to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to get there. Now, I grabbed my car keys and left the condo in a rush, adrenaline pumping through my veins. With every block, the image of Mr. Rodriguez, once so jovial, now frail and in agony, haunted me. Guilt, that old acquaintance of mine, began to eat at me. I was the one who gave him the bottle. I was the one who, unknowingly, had put him in this situation. I reached his house in minutes, my car screeching to a halt at the curb. I rang the doorbell urgently but didn't wait. The door was slightly ajar. I went inside, calling his name. "Hector, it's me, Elliot." The smell of something nauseating hung in the air. I found him in the living room, curled up on the sofa, pale, trembling, his hands clamped to his stomach. His face was contorted in pain. "Elliot! Oh, Elliot!" he groaned, his voice weak, barely recognizable. There was an empty wine glass on the coffee table, next to a few crumpled napkins. There was no doubt it was the wine. I didn't waste a second. "I'm calling an ambulance," I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the tremor in my hands. He tried to protest, but the pain was too severe. While waiting for the paramedics, I tried to comfort him, placing a blanket over his trembling shoulders. His eyes were glazed over, but I could see the fear in them. I asked him what he had eaten, what he had done, trying to find an explanation other than the wine, but he just shook his head, unable to articulate the words. The paramedics arrived quickly, their efficient, calm presence bringing a measure of relief, though the scene before me remained a nightmare. They explained they needed to take him to the hospital immediately. I rode with him in the ambulance, my mind fighting against the mounting suspicion. Daniel, could it be him? The idea was so monstrous, I refused to accept it, but every piece of evidence pointed in that direction. At the hospital, Mr. Rodriguez, Hector, was taken to the emergency room while I waited in the reception area, the clock on the wall moving with excruciating slowness. The hours dragged on. I called my daughter, Laura, Daniel's voice echoing in the background when she answered. "Dad, is everything okay?" I asked her about Daniel, about his bottle of wine. "Oh, he left right after dropping off the wine. Dad," she said, "he said he had an urgent work meeting, one of those he couldn't miss." The coincidence was crushing, too disturbing to be ignored. In my chest, the guilt of having passed the wine along mingled with a cold, rising anger. If my suspicions were correct, Daniel wasn't just a distant son-in-law. He was a man capable of unthinkable cruelty. Finally, a doctor came to speak with me. "Mr. Rodriguez is stable now, but it was a severe case of poisoning," he explained. "Initial tests indicate the ingestion of a significant amount of substances with extremely potent laxative properties mixed with alcohol. We're puzzled by the concentration and how he could have ingested something like that. He claims he only drank some wine he received from a friend." The word friend was a dagger. I was the friend. The bottle I gave him. My mind connected the dots with terrifying clarity. Daniel's goal wasn't a sick joke. It was public humiliation, and if I had drunk that wine, it would have been me on that gurney, suffering from cramps and nausea, being shamed at my own daughter's birthday party. His hollow smile, his insistence that I enjoy the wine, his rush to leave for his urgent meeting, it all made sense. The shock of the realization left me dizzy with horror and indignation. But how did he know I would pass the wine on? And more importantly, how did he do it? Understood. I will proceed with the narrative, focusing on the emotional, social, and internal challenges, ensuring the plot does not include deaths or acts that constitute crimes, in accordance with the strict guidelines provided. Daniel's intention will be to cause extreme discomfort and humiliation, exploring the consequences of his manipulative and deceitful actions. The hospital room walls seemed to whisper the truth I was trying to ignore. The guilt, the indignation, and the chilling certainty that the wine, that completely out-of-place gift, was the key to Hector's suffering. The doctors were perplexed by the concentration of potent laxative substances found in his system and the way they had been mixed with the alcohol. They mentioned it was a rare combination, almost scientific in its effectiveness at causing such intense discomfort without other serious complications. My heart tightened. How could such specific ingredients have ended up in a seemingly sealed drink? The image of Daniel, his fake smile and his cold eyes returned to haunt me. His rush to leave, his urgent meeting. Everything pointed to him. The intention to publicly humiliate me at my daughter's rapidly approaching birthday party echoed in my mind like a funeral bell. If I had consumed that wine, it would have been me, Elliot, collapsing in public, suffering an unspeakable shame. In the waiting room, as Hector slowly recovered, my phone rang. It was Laura, my daughter. "Dad, where are you? Daniel is home. He seems so worried about his father. He wants to go to the hospital." I felt a shiver. The performance had begun. "I'm at the hospital, honey. His dad is recovering. Don't worry, he's being well taken care of." I kept my voice calm, without any indication of the turmoil consuming me. A short time later, Daniel arrived at the hospital. His entrance was a spectacle. He walked into the waiting room with an air of exaggerated shock and concern, his eyes moist, his shoulders slumped in a perfect portrayal of the devoted son. "Dad!" he exclaimed, approaching Hector's bed with a calculated agitation. "What happened? I was so worried." He squeezed his father's hand, his voice choked with emotion, and offered to help in any way necessary. I watched him, every movement, every expression, his eyes, so expressive in tears, never met mine directly. There was a tension in his jaw, a slight shift in his eyes when they crossed with mine. His concern seemed excessive, almost theatrical. My intuition screamed that it was all a farce. He questioned the doctors about the cause of his father's illness, his inquiries detailed, almost as if he were checking if the substances had been detected or if the plan had left any traces. The doctors, however, were vague, focused only on recovery. I maintained my composure, my voice calm, my questions limited to genuine concerns for Hector's health. But inside, I was collecting every piece of evidence, building my own case against Daniel. During the first week of Hector's hospitalization, Daniel visited him every day with his impeccable performance of a worried son. I was always present, observing the interaction between them, looking for lapses in his act. He tried to engage me in conversations about his father's health, about possible causes. "Do you think he ate something spoiled?" he would ask, his eyes probing mine. "Or maybe he mixed something up, Elliot. You know how older people sometimes get confused with their medication." His attempt to sow doubt about his own father's capacity was disgusting. My heart broke for Laura. She was caught in the middle, an unwitting pawn in her husband's cruel game. I saw her look at Daniel with admiration and concern, completely oblivious to the darkness hiding behind his facade of affection. She defended him with a blind loyalty, which only increased my frustration. "Dad, Daniel is so distressed," Laura said one day. "He can't even sleep right. He's so worried about his father. He said you also seem very tense. I think all of this is making you a bit paranoid, maybe." With age, her words, imbued with the concern Daniel had planted in her, were more painful than a direct insult. It wasn't just my suspicions Daniel wanted to erase. He wanted to erase my ability to reason, to see the truth. His plan was more complex than I had imagined. He didn't just want to cause me humiliation, he wanted to completely discredit me, turning me into a confused and paranoid observer, incapable of leveling any credible accusation. My determination hardened. I would not let him rob me of my mental clarity, my reputation. The next piece of his cruel game was about to be revealed, and I needed to be ready for it. The second week of Hector's recovery in the hospital brought a new layer of manipulation from Daniel. His visits became more frequent, and his whispers of concern about my mental state became more insistent, especially when Laura was around. I saw my daughter absorb his every word, her expression changing from genuine concern to a mixture of doubt and embarrassment when she looked at me. "Dad, Daniel is saying you're very agitated by all this," Laura said one day, as we stood in the hospital hallway, out of Daniel's earshot. "He thinks you're seeing things, making up stories. He said it's not good for your health to get so obsessed with what happened." Her voice was soft, almost cautious, as if afraid to hurt me. But the words were his, and their echo was a direct hit. She was starting to believe Daniel's narrative, to see him as the concerned son and me as the paranoid father-in-law. My tendency to shoulder blame, though weakened by the certainty of the truth, still made me feel a pang of pain. Was I overreacting? Was my intuition deceiving me? No! Daniel's calculating gaze, his measured gestures, his theatrical concern, it all screamed the truth. He was building a fortress of lies around me, undermining my credibility, isolating me so that my voice would carry no weight. The situation worsened when I learned his next move. One afternoon, while having coffee at a local shop, I overheard two distant cousins, who hadn't noticed me, whispering. "Did you hear about Daniel's father?" one of them whispered. "Poor man, it seems the drink is really getting to him. Daniel is planning to blame it on his alcoholism, saying he mixed his own meds with the wine by mistake. It's a shame, such a distinguished family." My coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. Daniel's cynicism knew no bounds. Not only had he tried to harm me, but now he planned to destroy his own father's reputation to cover his tracks. His plan was diabolically clever: blame the victim, deflect attention, and simultaneously reinforce the idea that I was the paranoid one seeing conspiracies everywhere. I felt a cold shiver. How could Laura, my kind and sensitive daughter, be so influenced by such a Machiavellian man? My heart ached with worry for her. Daniel wasn't just deceiving me, he was deceiving her too, trapping her in a web of lies that, sooner or later, would hurt her deeply. I needed proof. Something irrefutable that would break through the barrier of deception Daniel had built. I knew he was meticulous, but haste and desperation can lead to mistakes. I started to revisit my memory, every detail of that day. The medicinal aroma, the golden label, his smile. I began to watch Daniel with silent vigilance, paying attention to his habits, his movements. He was a man of routines, and routines can be broken, revealing weaknesses. One afternoon, I decided to go to a different pharmacy than my usual one farther from my neighborhood. While waiting for my turn, I overheard a conversation between the pharmacist and a customer. "It's so strange," the pharmacist said. "Last week, a man came in here and asked a lot of questions about mixing certain substances with alcohol. He asked about severe gastrointestinal effects, said it was for research, but I found it very specific. He was tall, with dark hair, and had a calculating air about him. The description sent a chill down my spine. It was Daniel. I remembered my own encounter with him. The pharmacist continued to describe the incident, the details about the ingredients, their concentration. He wanted to know how to cause a great deal of discomfort, but without serious long-term consequences, almost as if he wanted to pull a very heavy-handed prank. What was a prank to the pharmacist? To me, was a premeditated attempt at humiliation. I felt my body tremble, not with fear, but with a controlled fury. The pieces were falling into place. I had a lead, a path to the truth. And I would not rest until Laura saw her husband for who he truly was. The conversation with the pharmacist echoed in my mind like an alarm. The words, specific substances, and severe gastrointestinal effects mixed with alcohol painted a cold, calculated picture. It wasn't a mistake, not a harmless prank. It was a deliberate intention to cause distress, to humiliate, to destroy a reputation. My intuition, now validated by such concrete proof, transformed my initial guilt into a quiet fury. I was not the culprit. I was the target. And Hector, Daniel's father, was the collateral damage of a sinister plan. The weight of this knowledge was almost unbearable. I looked at Laura and saw her tired face, her eyes still clouded by Daniel's lies. How could I, with my words, break through the barrier he had built around her? He was her husband, the father of her children, the man in whom she placed her trust and love. The thought of exposing him, of ripping the mask off in front of her was terrifying, not just for the confrontation that would follow, but for the pain it would cause my own daughter. I decided I needed more than my word and a pharmacist's confession. I needed something Laura couldn't ignore, something that would speak for itself, that would reveal Daniel's true face without my interference. I continued to visit Hector at the hospital, paying attention to every detail, every word. Daniel also continued his daily visits, with his air of concern and his calculating gaze hovering over me. He intensified his campaign of silent slander, sowing doubts about my mental health whenever Laura was around. "Dad, Daniel is really worried about you," Laura told me one day, her voice soft but laden with a caution that hurt me. "He said you've been asking strange questions, seeing things. He even suggested that maybe you should talk to a doctor just to make sure everything's okay." The lump in my throat tightened. He was paving the way to completely discredit me, to turn me into the paranoid old man who couldn't be taken seriously. His coldness was frightening. I continued my discreet surveillance. I started noticing small details in Daniel and Laura's house when I visited. Where did Daniel keep his important papers? He was an organized man, but desperation can lead to disorder. I thought about his habits, his vices. He was obsessed with control and had a penchant for keeping things in order. That, I knew, could be both a strength and a weakness. During one of my visits, while Laura was in the kitchen making tea, I took the opportunity for a quick look around. Daniel's office was always immaculate, but his desk had a pile of papers that seemed to be there temporarily. My intuition led me to a wastebasket under the desk, a crumpled piece of paper beneath other debris. With my sharp vision, I saw what looked like the edges of a label. Discreetly, I reached out, my heart pounding, and pulled out the paper. It was the packaging for a product, and the name on the package, though partially torn, was unmistakable. It was one of the ingredients the pharmacist had mentioned. My blood ran cold. The expiration date on the package indicated it had been purchased recently, days before the wine incident. There it was, the physical proof. My hand trembled as I crumpled the paper and stuffed it into my coat pocket. I had a lump in my throat, a mixture of relief and revulsion. He had been careless, or perhaps, in his arrogance, believed I would never find the evidence. But how would I present this to Laura? She was still under his spell. My mind raced, searching for the right way to make her see the truth, without destroying her in the process. My next move had to be perfect. It had to be a blow he couldn't deflect. With the crumpled packaging in my pocket, I felt a complex mix of triumph and dread. The proof was irrefutable, tangible, but how to present it to Laura, my daughter, who still defended her husband with a loyalty that broke my heart? She would see the packaging as a senile obsession, a sign of my paranoia. The pain of seeing my own daughter so blinded by Daniel's manipulation was almost unbearable. I tried, one afternoon, as we had tea in my living room. I took the package from my pocket, carefully uncrumpled it, and placed it on the table. "Laura, look at this," I began, my voice calm but with the urgency I felt in my chest. "I found this in the trash in Daniel's office. It's the packaging for one of the ingredients he used to tamper with the wine he gave me." She looked at the paper, then at me, her eyes expressing a mixture of confusion and irritation. "Dad, what is this?" she said, her tone already defensive. "You're getting obsessed with this. Daniel said you're looking for things that aren't there. Please, stop. This is hurting me." Her words were a blow. She wasn't ready to see. Her mind was so programmed by Daniel's narrative that any contrary evidence was dismissed as delusion. I knew I needed a different approach, something that came from a source she couldn't ignore, a revelation she would be forced to accept. The nightmare continued through the week. Every visit from Daniel to his father's house at the hospital and then to our home became a test of nerves. He maintained his facade of concern, his eyes watching me with a calculated attempt to find out what I knew, if I had spoken to anyone, if my paranoia had escalated. The tension was almost unbearable, especially knowing that he had deliberately tried to harm me and that my own daughter unknowingly was his ally. I continued my visits to the hospital, focusing on Hector's recovery. He was improving every day, and his mind was clearer. One morning, as we had breakfast together, he made a casual comment that sent a chill down my spine. "Elliot, you know, that wine you gave me, it had a strange taste. Almost medicinal, unlike any wine I've ever tasted. But since it came from you, I thought it must be some kind of special wine from a rarer vintage or something." He described the bottle, the golden label, the details Daniel had given me with a precision that couldn't be a coincidence. In that moment, all the pieces fell into place. My intuition screamed he tried to poison me. The realization left me dizzy with horror and indignation. If I had drunk that wine, it would have been me on that hospital gurney, suffering public humiliation during my daughter's birthday. His plan was so vile, so calculated. It wasn't just about making me ill. It was an attempt to expose me, to ridicule me, to get me out of the way for good. My anger turned into a cold determination. I would not allow it. I would not be silent. I would not be the victim. At the end of the third week, things got worse. Daniel forged a medical prescription in my name, trying to create evidence that I was on medication that could have caused the confusion with the wine. He was building an elaborate case to discredit me as a reliable witness. This, I knew, was the preparation for his final blow. The situation came to a head when Daniel scheduled a medical appointment to evaluate my mental capacity, claiming concern over my paranoid behavior. He planned to have me committed against my will, using the wine incident as evidence of my supposed senile dementia. I had 48 hours. My time was running out. I needed proof that Laura couldn't ignore, something from an unquestionable source. I visited Hector again. He was home, recovering, and his mind was sharper. "Hector, my friend," I said, using the warm term we had developed over the years, "I need your help. It's about the wine. Do you remember how I asked you not to drink too much?" He nodded, his brow furrowed. I told him my suspicions, the pharmacist's observations, the packaging I found. I saw disbelief turn to shock, then to anger. "That's not possible," he whispered, his voice weak. "My son wouldn't do that." But the look in his eyes said otherwise. There was doubt and then a terrible certainty. It was then that he remembered something. "Elliot," he said, his voice a little stronger, "I saw Daniel researching things on the computer. For weeks, things about gastrointestinal poisoning and natural purgatives. I thought it was out of curiosity, about my health. But now, Hector's revelation was the breakthrough I had been waiting for, the research on Daniel's computer. That was the smoking gun, something he couldn't deny. That Sunday morning of the fourth week, with all the evidence gathered, I decided it was time to confront Daniel. There would be no more silence, no more whispers. The truth would be revealed. The fourth Sunday morning dawned with an oppressive weight in the air. The smell of fresh coffee in the kitchen seemed out of place, a banality before the storm I was about to unleash. Daniel and Laura had come for breakfast, a routine we maintained, but which, for me, had become a facade. Daniel's father, Hector, was also with us, more recovered now but still frail. Daniel was smiling, his perfect mask in place, chatting about plans for the day, oblivious to my knowledge of his machinations. Laura, though still a bit pale, seemed more relaxed in her husband's presence, a sight that pained my heart. It was time. There was no more room for hesitation. I took a deep breath, the fresh air burning my lungs. "Daniel," I began, my voice calm and controlled, but with a subtext that only he and I hoped he would understand. His eyes, which had previously shone with false cordiality, fixed on me. A micro-movement, a quick blink, revealed a hint of alarm. "There's something we need to talk about," Laura frowned, sensing the abrupt shift in the atmosphere. "Dad, what is it?" she asked, her voice a little tense. Hector stopped eating, his eyes moving between me and his son. I didn't accuse him directly at first. I started with the bottle of wine. "Do you remember the bottle of French wine you gave me a few weeks ago, Daniel?" I asked, watching every muscle in his face. He hesitated for a millisecond. "Of course. Elliot, a gift, you know." His smile became a little more forced. "Yes," I continued, my voice cold, "a very peculiar gift. Its aroma was unusual, almost medicinal. Your father noticed too, didn't you, Hector?" Hector looked at me, his eyes expressing surprise. "Yes, Elliot, I remember saying it was different, but I thought it was just a type of wine I didn't know well." His innocent response was the first crack in Daniel's facade. I saw a flash of panic in his eyes. "Well, that bottle of wine caused a severe poisoning in your father," I said, my voice rising slightly, but still under control. Laura gasped, looking at Daniel, then at his father, then back at me. "Dad, what are you saying? It was just a wine." Her voice was choked, a mixture of disbelief and defensiveness. Daniel, on the other hand, tried to regain control. "Elliot, that's absurd. You're making things up. Dad was sick before. Maybe he mixed his own medication with alcohol, as the doctors suggested." His voice was laden with false indignation. "No," I said firmly. "The doctors said the poisoning was caused by extremely potent laxatives, skillfully mixed with the alcohol. And no, Laura, your father-in-law is not an alcoholic. And he didn't mix any medications. He drank the wine Daniel gave him." The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Laura looked at Daniel, her eyes pleading for a convincing denial. But Daniel was losing his composure. His hands were trembling slightly. This is crazy, Elliot. You're going senile. You're inventing a conspiracy." His voice was higher now, his attempt to discredit me more desperate. It was then that Hector, who had been silent, watching the scene with wide eyes, intervened. His voice was weak, but filled with a terrible certainty. "Daniel, your computer searches. The ones about gastrointestinal poisoning and natural purgatives. Elliot told me about it. You did search for those things, didn't you?" His voice was a murmur, but each word hit Daniel like a lightning bolt. His face, once pale, turned red. His mask completely shattered. The panic was evident. He looked from me to his father, then to Laura, who was now staring at him with growing horror. The proof was there. His own research, his own bottle, his own victim. "You tried to poison me," I said calmly, my voice now a whisper that sounded like thunder. "If I had drunk that wine, it would have been me on that hospital gurney, not your father." Laura recoiled, her hand to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. The raw, cruel truth was before her, and there was no denying it. Daniel was cornered, his posture deflated, his gaze darting away from ours. His breathing became shallow. And he opened his mouth to speak, his voice caught in his throat, about to reveal the darkest secrets of his soul. The air in the kitchen was so thick you could cut it with a knife, heavy with the newly revealed truth. Daniel, cornered by his own secrets and the unexpected testimony of his father, collapsed. His posture deflated, his gaze darting away from ours, fixing on some invisible point on the floor. The words, when they finally came, were halting, weak, almost a whisper. I didn't want to poison you, Elliot." His voice trembled, his pathetic denial a reflection of his defeat. Laura, motionless beside me, was pale, her eyes wide with horror as she watched her husband's mask disintegrate. "You weren't going to poison me," I repeated calmly, my voice cold, emotionless. "Then what was the intention? To humiliate me publicly, to make me a laughingstock at my daughter's birthday, to make everyone believe I was becoming senile and confused." He raised his head, his eyes bloodshot, not with remorse, but with a desperate anger. "You don't understand, Elliot. You were always the perfect father-in-law, always there, always giving advice, always helping Laura. It was like she loved you more than me, like I was never good enough for her in your eyes." His confession was a river of accumulated resentment, a flood of jealousy and insecurities that had been eating away at him for years. He spoke of small things, of compliments Laura paid me, of times she asked for my opinion instead of his. Every memory in his twisted mind was proof of my interference, a reason to want me out of the way. His plan, he confessed, was a desperate act of self-assertion. He wanted to prove to Laura and to himself that he was the dominant man in her life. "I researched it," he admitted, his voice a little louder now, his confession gaining a sick rhythm. "I researched substances that would cause maximum gastrointestinal discomfort, but that weren't dangerous. That would dissipate quickly in the body. I wanted you to get sick at the party, to be the family joke, for Laura to see how frail and old you were. I wanted her to lose confidence in you, to turn to me for stability." He looked at Laura, his expression a mixture of desperation and a hint of defiance. "I did this for us, Laura, so we could have our own space, so you would see me as your safe harbor, not your father." His words hit Laura like shockwaves. I saw her expression break. The horror in her eyes deepened, turning into an overwhelming pain, a betrayal deeper than any poison. She staggered back, leaning against the kitchen counter, her knees trembling. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible, You would do that, humiliate my father, try to harm him, out of jealousy." Her tears began to fall, silent at first, then in torrents. "And your father," she continued, her voice rising, the hurt mixed with a cold anger. "You put your own father's life at risk. You lied to me. You made me doubt my own father." Hector, who had been silent, his face in shock, now looked at his son with a deep sorrow, a disappointment that was almost palpable. "My son," he murmured, his voice shaking. "What have you done?" Daniel tried to reach for her, but Laura flinched away abruptly, as if he were contaminated. Her trust, the love she had for him, was shattering right there in front of me into 1,000 painful pieces. Daniel's humiliation was complete, not by me, but by his own revelation, by his own cruelty. He had exposed his darkest soul, and Laura was seeing him for the first time, not as the loving husband, but as the calculating manipulator he was. The smell of coffee in the kitchen seemed suffocating. The scene was painful, but necessary. The truth, however cruel, had been revealed. And now, the consequences of this act of emotional poison were beginning to unfold in ways none of us could have predicted, but which, I knew, would be profound and transformative for my daughter. Daniel's confession hung in the kitchen, an echo of twisted truths and buried jealousy. Laura was visibly shaken, her knees trembling as she moved away from her husband. The figure she saw there was not the man she married, but a shadow, a twisted version she never suspected existed. The initial shock gave way to a quiet fury evident in her eyes, which before had only expressed sadness. "Get out, Daniel," Laura said, her voice low but charged with a strength I had never heard from her. "Get out of my house, now!" Daniel tried to protest, reaching a hand toward her, but she recoiled further. Hector, with his weak but disappointment-laden voice, added, "Go, Daniel. We need time to process this." Cornered and out of arguments, Daniel relented. His posture shrank even more, and he left the kitchen without looking back, the front door closing with a dry thud that sealed the end of an era. The silence that followed his departure was filled only by Laura's stifled sobs. She collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands, tears streaming uncontrollably. I sat beside her, saying nothing, just placing an arm around her shoulders, offering my silent presence. It was a grief I couldn't alleviate with words, only with my presence and unconditional support. Hector, still in shock, slowly stood up and came to us. His eyes, filled with a sadness mixed with a hint of anger, met mine. "Elliot," he said, his voice low, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. My son would do that." His disbelief was genuine, and his heart seemed to be breaking with the revelation of his own son's true nature. "He did, Hector," I said softly, squeezing Laura's shoulder. "But the important thing is that the truth is out, and that you are well." Hector sat in another chair, his head in his hands. His pain was that of a father watching his son lose his way. That day, our family, in a strange way, expanded. Hector, who until then had been a distant father-in-law, now shared with us the pain and shame caused by his son. His presence, though quiet, was an unexpected bond of solidarity. We spent the rest of the morning talking, trying to digest the events. Laura, between sobs, began to revisit her marriage, seeing the little signs she had ignored, the warnings her intuition, clouded by love, had suppressed. "He was always jealous of you, Dad," she admitted, lifting her face, her eyes red but with a new clarity. "I thought it was a silly thing, a passing insecurity, but it was poison, a slow poison. I knew the road ahead for Laura would be long and painful. The divorce, reorganizing her life, reevaluating everything she believed in, but I also knew she was strong. The way she had confronted Daniel, her determination to push him away, were proof of her resilience. My role now was no longer to investigate or confront, but to be her anchor, the safe harbor she could trust. "I'll be here for you, my daughter," I said, my voice filled with an unbreakable promise, "always." Hector also offered his support, a demonstration of a new family alliance forged in adversity. The truth had been revealed, the masks had fallen, and the air in the kitchen, though still heavy, now contained a lightness of honesty, of a new beginning. That wine, which Daniel had used as a weapon, ironically became the catalyst for the necessary revelation, a turning point for our family. But I knew the healing process was just beginning, and the coming weeks would be crucial for rebuilding. The days following Daniel's confession were a whirlwind of complex emotions, yet paradoxically, also a period of strange clarity. The mask of forced cordiality I had worn for months finally fell away, revealing a profound relief. But Laura's pain was palpable, an open wound I watched with a heavy heart. She was in a state of contained shock, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Hector, whom we now affectionately called by his first name, and I became her pillars. He, with his quietness and his own fatherly pain, and I, with my constant presence and unwavering support. Laura moved into my condo for the first few days, seeking refuge and time to breathe away from what Daniel had made her home. Our conversations were long and punctuated by significant silences. She cried, spoke of her confusion, her anger, and her fear of the future. I just listened, holding her hand, offering a shoulder to cry on. There was no need for grand words. Our connection was felt, not spoken. Although Daniel's intention was not a crime in the legal sense, his confession and malicious plan had severe consequences for his marriage. Laura, with Hector's support and mine, began divorce proceedings. The process was heavy, not just legally, but emotionally. Every document, every meeting with the lawyer seemed to relive the pain of betrayal. Daniel, for his part, tried to contact her incessantly with pathetic messages of regret and pleas for forgiveness. Laura ignored them all. Her disappointment was too deep to be healed by empty words. I saw her resilience grow each day, a quiet strength emerging from her pain. She didn't fall apart, she was rebuilding herself. Hector, for his part, was processing his own pain. The disappointment in his son was obvious, but there was also a responsibility he felt. He came to live with me for a while, as he needed to fully recover and also needed support. Our friendship, already solid, deepened. We shared morning coffees and long conversations about life, about the mistakes we've made and the lessons we've learned. He expressed his sadness at how Daniel had lost his way, and I offered the perspective that sometimes the truth, however harsh, is the only path to healing. Hector's presence in my home brought a new dynamic. We were no longer alone, nor was Laura. We were a small, safe harbor for our wounded souls. As the dust settled, the news of Laura and Daniel's divorce and Daniel's confession began to spread through the family and among friends. The reactions were varied. Some expressed shock and solidarity, appalled by Daniel's true face and my story. Others, unfortunately, maintained a persistent skepticism. The narrative Daniel had built about my paranoia and Laura's instability still had its believers. We received looks of pity and whispers of, "Poor Laura, she must be going through a tough time with her mother and father-in-law." This, I knew, was Daniel trying, from a distance, to sow discord, to undermine our credibility, to try to control the narrative even after being unmasked. One day, Laura came home with a worried expression. She had run into one of Daniel's old friends at the supermarket, and the conversation had not been pleasant. She asked if I was coping well with my eccentric father and Daniel's father's drinking problems. Laura recounted, her voice choked. She said Daniel is spreading rumors that Hector and I are using his illness to push him away, and that you're manipulating me to leave him and take full control of his assets. I felt anger bubble up. He wasn't finished. Even from afar, Daniel was trying, through gossip and insinuation, to rewrite history, to tarnish our image, to destroy our newfound peace. I knew this new battle, fought in the shadows of public opinion, would be more insidious than the last, and that his intention was to isolate us further, making Laura's recovery more difficult. His final blow was yet to come. Daniel's campaign, waged in the shadows of gossip and insinuation, was more insidious than any direct confrontation. He didn't need to shout accusations, he just had to plant the seed of doubt, and people's imaginations would do the rest. Laura, already navigating the turbulent waters of divorce and a re-evaluation of her life, felt the weight of these whispers with painful intensity. She, who had always been so loved and respected, now saw in the eyes of some a pity mixed with distrust. People would avert their gaze at the supermarket, conversations would abruptly cease when she approached, and social invitations to family events began to dwindle. "Dad, I feel like I'm being judged," Laura told me one night, her eyes welling up as she helped Hector clear the dishes. "As if I were to blame for everything, for leaving him, for having turned his father against him. It's so unfair." Her voice was a lament, the pain of injustice gnawing at her. I felt every pang of her pain as if it were my own. My tendency to shoulder blame resurfaced. I had exposed the truth, yes, but at a cost my daughter was now paying. My heart ached to see her like this. I tried to reassure her, "Honey, the people who really matter will know the truth. The rest, in time, will either see it or they aren't worth your suffering." but my words felt hollow, an insufficient balm for the wound the slander was opening. Hector, in his quiet way, also noticed the change. He watched with sadness the family interactions, the way some of his own siblings began to treat him with a caution that bordered on suspicion, as if his own son had succeeded in tarnishing his image as well. He, a simple and good man, was now associated with his son's madness. The situation reached its boiling point at what should have been a simple dinner at an aunt's house. Daniel was not present, but his influence was a silent, omnipresent guest. The atmosphere was tense, the conversations superficial and filled with half-truths. I noticed the curious glances, the whispers disguised as coughs. I felt like an insect under a microscope, and Laura, beside me, was visibly uncomfortable, her posture tense. One of my cousins, always the most direct and least empathetic, approached Laura with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Laura, dear, Daniel is saying you left him when he needed you most, that you're being manipulated by your father and your father-in-law, who just want to control his fortune. Is it true you're trying to have the poor man, his father, committed to control him?" Her voice was loud enough for the whole table to hear. Laura's heart seemed to stop. The accusations were a distorted mirror of the truths I had revealed, turned against us. Daniel was using his own tactics back at us, reversing the roles. Laura was silent for a moment, the color draining from her face. I felt her hand tremble in mine. I was about to intervene, to defend her, when she squeezed my hand, a subtle but firm gesture. She looked directly at the cousin, her eyes expressing a new determination. "No, Aunt Carol," Laura said, her voice low but clear. "Daniel is trying to control the narrative because the truth, the real truth, is that he tried to harm my father, Elliot, out of jealousy and insecurity, and put his own father's life at risk with his manipulations. He doesn't control us anymore." Her words, though brave, were met with a mixture of shock and an awkward silence. Some glances turned to me, then to Hector. The doubt still lingered. The truth wasn't enough. They had believed the lies for too long. As we drove home that night, exhaustion weighed on us. Laura was frustrated, feeling that despite her courage, the seeds of doubt still persisted. "And no matter what I say, Dad," she sighed, "it seems like his story is already set." Hector nodded, his expression melancholic. "A reputation is a hard thing to rebuild, my dear Elliot, especially when someone is actively working against you." I knew he was right. Daniel wouldn't stop. He would continue to undermine our position, to try to isolate us socially, and my intuition, which had guided me so well, whispered to me that his next move would not be just gossip, but something more direct and more cruel. Something that would target our most vulnerable point, to force us to either yield or be completely annihilated. Daniel's insistence on undermining our peace was like a slow poison seeping into our lives through gossip and insinuation. The silent campaign of discredit caused constant pain for Laura, who felt the weight of judgments and half-truths. I saw her weary soul, her frustration at not being able to make the truth prevail. Hector, in his quiet wisdom, observed and supported, but his own sorrow over his son's conduct was a constant shadow. My intuition, which warned me of the darkest intentions, whispered to me that Daniel would not be content to fight only in the shadows. He was a man of action, and his desperation would lead to one last act of retaliation. I knew he would target our most vulnerable point, and so he did. One afternoon, Laura came home, pale and with red eyes. She had been called into an urgent meeting with her superiors at the company where she worked. Someone had sent anonymous emails and made calls to her boss, alleging that Laura was experiencing a severe emotional breakdown due to the divorce, and that her judgment was compromised by the eccentric influence of her father and father-in-law. The emails made vague references to the wine incident and my newfound paranoia, twisting the facts to paint a picture of family instability. Daniel's intention was clear: to make Laura lose her job, her financial independence, and with it, her newly won freedom. "They want me to take a leave of absence," Laura whispered, her voice fragile. "They said it's for my own good, so I can take care of myself. But I know what it is. He wants to destroy me, Dad. He wants me to be dependent, with nothing." The sight of my daughter, for whom I had striven so hard to give strength and independence, being attacked in this way, awakened a cold fury in me. This wasn't just gossip, it was a direct assault on her dignity and her future. I could not allow it. Hector, upon hearing the story, was outraged. "This boy has no limits," he muttered, his face contorted with anger. "Laura, we will not allow this. We will not let him win." At that moment, Laura, who was on the verge of despair, looked at us. I saw in her eyes not just sadness, but a spark of new determination. "No," she said, lifting her head, "I won't. I fought too hard to get here, and I won't let him take this from me." The next day, I accompanied Laura to her company. As we entered the meeting room with her superiors, the atmosphere was tense and fraught with suspicion. Laura, however, maintained her composure. She did not deny the difficulties of the divorce, but she spoke with clarity and dignity about recent events. She told the truth about Daniel's manipulation, about the wine incident, and how it revealed his true nature, not her instability. She defended her own competence and her ability to handle professional and personal pressures. To my surprise, and to Laura's relief, the human resources manager, an experienced and perceptive woman, listened intently. In the end, she looked at Laura with evident respect. "Ms. Miller," she said, "we appreciate your honesty. We investigated these anonymous allegations and the inconsistency of the information, and your ex-husband's history of retaliation had already raised some red flags for us. Your professional record speaks for itself, and your courage in sharing your truth today only strengthens our confidence in you." The manager offered Laura the leave, but made it clear it was an offer, not a demand. "The decision is yours, Laura. We know you are an exemplary employee, and we trust your ability to continue working if you so choose." Laura looked at me, then at Hector, who was waiting for us in the hallway, and her decision was firm. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I don't need a leave of absence. I need to work. I need to move forward." That moment was a watershed. It wasn't just her job she had saved. It was her self-esteem, her belief in her own strength. Daniel had failed. His attempt to destroy her had only served to cement her resilience and the truth of her story. When we left the company, I felt the sunlight on my skin like an embrace. The anger that had once consumed me gave way to a deep sense of peace. Daniel's plan, aimed at annihilation, had turned out to be the catalyst for our true liberation. Laura, by my side, walked with a different posture, lighter, stronger. The arc of her suffering was finding its resolution. However, I knew that complete healing, full acceptance, was a journey, not a destination. The final stage would be gentler, but equally significant at bringing closure to this entire ordeal. Today, a month after that fateful wine incident, with the storms of the past finally dissipating, I feel a peace that had long been foreign to me, that poisoned gift from Daniel, which nearly destroyed my daughter and myself, ironically proved to be the catalyst for a profound transformation. I look back and see that my sharp intuition, sometimes clouded by my naive kindness and tendency to shoulder blame, was my salvation. It whispered warnings to me when the world tried to convince me otherwise, and that inner voice is now clearer and stronger than ever. My life, which I thought was heading towards a twilight of quiet and perhaps solitude, has blossomed in an unexpected way. Hector, a man of good heart and quiet soul, has become a constant and dear presence in my home. We share not just meals, but comfortable silences and memories. His recovery has been complete, and his wisdom, tempered by the disappointment in his son, has become a balm for our souls. He found in Laura and me a refuge of honesty and affection, and we in him a valuable link in a family rebuilt on pillars of truth and mutual support. His presence is a daily reminder that even in the most painful circumstances, new and beautiful connections can emerge. Laura, my daughter, is living proof of human resilience. The scars of Daniel's betrayal are still there, invisible but present, but they do not define her. On the contrary, they have made her stronger, more insightful, and incredibly more compassionate. The divorce is proceeding, and she is rebuilding her life with a dignity and determination that fill me with pride. She did not hide, she did not let herself be defeated. Instead, she held her head high and confronted Daniel's lies with her truth. Her stance at her company, the way she defended her integrity and professional ability, was a testament to the remarkable woman she has become. She now knows her own worth and does not allow the malice of others to diminish it. Our relationship, once marked by unspoken worries and my struggle to win her husband's approval, is now grounded in a brutal honesty and unconditional love. We talk openly about everything, without mincing words, without fear. Our conversations are deeper, our laughter more genuine. That poisoned wine was the catalyst that forced a purge, not just of my body, but of the lies and toxicity that had infiltrated our family. The truth, however painful it was, set us free. It freed Laura from her emotional captivity and me from my self-blame. At 72, I have learned that life is a complex tapestry, woven with threads of joy and pain, of light and shadow. Believing in the genuine goodness of people is still part of me, but now it comes with a healthy dose of discernment. My tendency to shoulder blame has transformed into an ability to understand the motivations of others without letting them affect me. Daniel is facing the consequences of his actions, not just legally but emotionally. We've heard he's in therapy, confronting his own demons and insecurities. I wish him no ill, only that he finds his own path to truth and healing. Today, sitting at my kitchen table, with the aroma of morning coffee filling the air, Laura and Hector share a laugh over a TV show they watched.